What's up, guys? Rob here, and as you guys can see, I'm alone here, and that is because he actually is on assignment right now, not for the Herd Handbook, but he is actually currently the caretaker of the Overlook Hotel. So Tiz will be back with us hopefully next week for the UFC 325 podcast, but you guys are stuck with me today. But we have a lot to talk about. UFC 324, Zuffa Boxing 1. There was some PFL news that kind of got buried by all the stuff that happened over the weekend. There's a ton that we could talk about. And in the interest of time, I'd say we just hop right into it. So it was an eventful weekend in combat sports, but I think we have to start with UFC 324 and the beginning of the Paramount deal for the UFC and Zuffa Boxing, but we'll get to that. But for UFC 324, so to start off with the broadcast before we get into the fights, I'm curious what you guys think too, because I feel like it was a mixed bag. And the reason why I think the Paramount broadcast was a mixed bag to start off is partially because it was the first broadcast. So, like, you're bound to have to iron out a few kinks there. And I thought Kate Scott did a good job on the desk. I think the chemistry is still getting there, but again, like, first show, you have to expect things like that. I know a lot of people weren't happy about the ads. I'm included in that a group of people because I do think that obviously like you're gonna have to have ads, especially when there's no pay-per-view money to be made. So I get that. But during the walkouts and during the corner work for like the co-main and main event, I mean, is that really necessary? We could probably get more ads at the beginning of the main card so that way we can, really enjoy the fighting aspect of it at the end. Because, like, I'll say this, one of the things I didn't like about the ads on this Paramount broadcast was the fact that, like, they would show the corner, but then they were muting it. So, like, I remember in round 3 of the main event, Joe Rogan was talking about how Justin Gaethje kept grabbing his right hand, and he's like, oh, I wonder if his hand's broken. And then we get to the end of the third round, and then there's an ad on the screen, and I can't hear what he's saying to his corner. And I'm like, well, is his hand broken or is it not? And, like, in hindsight, obviously it wasn't that big of a deal. But when you're watching it live, I'm like, well, is he hurt right now? Instead, I'm watching an ad for DraftKings or whatever. And, like, oh, God, like, that's just so frustrating. And like I said, I do get that they have to put the ads there. I mean, especially when you're only charging for a subscription. But, like, man, they could do it in any other spot. Like, I wouldn't even care if they took more time in between fights to fit all of these ads in. But it's like, why are you doing it during the fight and then, like, during the walkouts, too? And I know they showed the main event walkouts, but, like, still, I like the whole main card walkouts. And I'm sure you could watch it all, like, back again, because I know I did watch a few of the fights individually, and they didn't have the ads that were there during the live broadcast. But, I do agree with what everybody was saying about it. And, I don't want to completely shit on it, though, because it was really good for the most part. I mean, it felt like a typical UFC broadcast. I don't think that they really added anything. And the thing is, and I don't know if a lot of people really know this, I'm assuming they do, though. Like, the UFC, they run their own broadcast. Like, they're airing on Paramount, but that's the UFC's crew that's doing the broadcast. And that's why it looks the same from place to place. But the thing is, I think that they did a good job at making this feel special. I like that big package that they did at the beginning of the main card with War Pigs, and then the whole show on like the curtains or whatever above the cage, and then they rise up and it's Bruce Buffer introducing you into the Paramount era. That was really cool. I did enjoy that. So overall for the UFC, I think that this was a success. I think the fights really helped that, as we're about to get into. But yeah, I think that it was a mixed bag. I think like the chemistry could have been a little better, and obviously there were a few mistakes too. Bruce Buffer reading the wrong name for the first fight, that was kind of funny. And yeah, just like random mishaps with like hearing people who are mic'd up who maybe like shouldn't be talking on air right in that second. There was some breathing. I heard about that. I didn't really notice that when I was watching live, but that's kind of what I mean, though. There were like a lot of little production mistakes. But I think the fights really overshadowed that. And for the start of an era, I think that this card was fantastic. And with that, I say we hop right into the main event. And let's talk about it. Justin Gaethje versus Paddy Pimblett. Justin Gaethje defeats Paddy Pimblett by unanimous decision, 249-46 scorecards and 148-47. I mean, where could you even start? So, I mean, Gaethje versus Pimblett was an instant classic. If you didn't realize that while you were watching it, there's something wrong there. And, this wasn't the most technical fight of all time. And I guess, like, for a championship fight, you'd want it to be a little more technical. But when you're talking about the start of a new era on Paramount, this is the type of fight that you want all fans to see. And hardcore fans enjoy a war just as much as a casual fan would. So I think that this fight was absolutely fantastic. It's probably going to end up being fight of the year, which is crazy considering it's the first event. I was actually texting Tiz during the fight, and I was like, this is crazy. Like, it was probably in between rounds 2 and 3. I was like, we've been through 10 minutes of this fight, and I think that this is already better than any fight that we had in 2025, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's a good thing for the future. Bad thing for 2025 is concerned, though. But yeah, Justin Gaethje wins the interim title. I scored it similarly to the 48-47 card, but I could understand it being 49-46, so I'm not that mad at that. But the fight, Gaethje versus Pimblett, this was just a war. And it was just 25 minutes. It's pretty much of all offense by both guys, just in different ways. I thought Paddy did a much better job when they were in the center, and he was using a lot more weapons than Gaethje, and he was attacking to different parts of the body too, while Gaethje was kind of headhunting. Well, not kind of, he was. So, and the thing with Gaethje though too, he did a really good job at backing Paddy up into the cage, and then really doing a good job at aiming and firing just big shots to the head. And I really don't know how Paddy took a lot of those, because some of those shots were just insane. He really proved the phrase that Scousers don't get knocked out. And but yeah, that's really what I thought of this one. Paddy Pimblett did really good in the center, attacking Justin's legs, hitting the body, getting some combinations in on the head. But for the most part in this fight, Justin Gaethje did a really good job at cutting off the cage and putting Paddy up against the cage and hitting him with some massive punches. And Paddy's toughness needs to be commended, because those shots would have knocked quite a few people out at lightweight. And Paddy was just taking them and getting right back up and then landing combinations of his own. So his chin is just unreal. So is Gaethje's. He took a lot of shots as well. And Justin Gaethje kind of alluded to it as well. This felt like the fight where Paddy Pimblett really learned about the highest level. I think Paddy Pimblett is going to get a lot better from this fight. And there's so many different directions, because you could talk about Paddy, but I want to start with Gaethje because Gaethje won the fight. So now he's the interim champion at lightweight. And I know that people are angry that it's not Arman who was in this fight instead of one of these guys. But still, reality's reality. Justin Gaethje is the interim champion, and he's going to be fighting Ilia Topuria next. At first, I said to myself, I would love to see Gaethje fight Topuria at the White House. But then you start to think about it. This is supposed to be like a celebration for America. And I do think Gaethje is a reasonable underdog against Topuria. And it's very likely that Gaethje could get knocked out in that fight. So I'm just thinking about it logically. Do you want an American to get knocked out in the main event on the White House lawn by someone who's not American? And I don't know if the UFC would want that to happen. But, if we don't get Conor McGregor or John Jones on the White House card, a fight like that might be the biggest fight that you can make, and you might just have to run that risk. But either way, that's the fight that we're getting next. Stylistically, it's a really fun matchup. I think it's going to be interesting like this one. I think a lot of it's going to be on the feet. But the thing is, if Gaethje fights Ilia Topuria the way he just fought Paddy Pimblett, it's not going to be a really good night for him, because Topuria is just a lethal, accurate striker, and he has so much power, and it seems like even more power at 155 than he did at 145. So it's worrying if Gaethje's going to fight him like that, but how could you not be excited about that matchup? So I'm just amped for it. I'd love to see it at the White House. Not sure if it's going to be there. But either way, I know we're going to be getting it at some point this year, and that brings me a lot of excitement. But as for Paddy Pimblett, I do think he should take a little bit of time after this fight. I mean, he took a lot of damage, and I know he didn't get knocked out cold or anything, but like you guys saw his face in those later rounds, it was so busted up. And the thing is, he's still a young guy, and this was one loss, and it's not like he's losing out much by not by waiting, because you know Gaethje has to fight Topuria. Arman's above Paddy at this point, I think, no matter what. I would imagine that Arman's going to have to fight again, though, in between this fight and whenever Gaethje fights for the title. But still, if Arman wins again, he's still above Paddy. So I think that Paddy could take a lot of time here. And the thing is, too, I think there's like a ready-made fight right now for Paddy Pimblett, depending on, well, honestly, not even depending on what happens next week. But UFC 325, Dan Hooker is fighting Benoit Saint-Denis. And there's a storyline between Dan Hooker and Paddy Pimblett. I would love to see that fight no matter what happens next week for that co-main event. And like the UFC right now, and me and Tiz talked about this ad nauseum last year, the UFC kind of has like a promotion problem, and not to the extent that other promotions have, but for the UFC standard, I think the promotions could be a lot better. And I think a fight that has genuine heat behind it, like a Paddy Pimblett versus Dan Hooker, would be absolutely fantastic. And the reason why I think you could make it either way is because if Dan wins, he's still right back into that upper echelon at 155, where Paddy still is right now, even though he lost. And I know the UFC doesn't like matching up a guy who just won versus a guy who just lost, but I think that this fight makes a lot of sense if Hooker gets through BSD. But even if he doesn't, though, then they're both coming off of losses. And then you could argue it actually makes even more sense for the UFC to make that fight. So I just think this fight would be amazing to promote, and I think it would be really exciting for the fans. I think it would be exciting for them. I think it would make them both train their asses off, because, I mean, I really do think that these guys don't like each other. And, I know people feel very strongly about this one way or the other. But regardless, I think that's what builds this fight. So I hope that maybe in the later part of 2026 we end up getting it. But, I mean, this main event, the last thing I kind of want to say about it is I saw it was getting some criticism, mostly like today, honestly. I'm recording this on Monday. It was getting a lot of criticism about being a low-level championship fight. And, like, yeah, I mean, I do agree with that. Obviously, it wasn't the most technical fight of all time. But I just feel like you can't make everybody happy nowadays, because, like, how could you watch that fight and then have a negative opinion after it? Like, yeah, sure, it was the sloppiest championship fight you'll ever see. But, like, were you not glued to the TV screen for 25 straight minutes? I mean, people hate on anything nowadays, I guess. It's just really negative. And trust me, there's enough things in the UFC that you can hate on. This was not one of them. So shout out to both of those guys for putting on quite a show for us. And that was one of the most exciting UFC fights that I've seen in a very long time. And it was just a perfect way to cap off the first event on Paramount. But we have more fights to talk about, so let's move on to the co-main event, and let's talk about Sugar Sean O'Malley versus Song Yadong. And there's been a lot of talk about this fight, and I actually have a very strong opinion on this. So Sean O'Malley wins via unanimous decision, he wins by unanimous decision, 329-28 scorecards. This was a really gritty win for Sean O'Malley. And I know a lot of people are like, this was a robbery. I don't understand how you could think that. I thought this was a pretty clear win for Sean O'Malley. I gave Sean rounds 1 and 3, clear as day. And everybody who says that Song won, we're giving him round 1. I don't know how you can give Song round 1, because Sean O'Malley was piecing him up the entire round pretty much until the very end, when Song got him down, I think with like 20 seconds left. And he didn't do anything with that top control. So you can't really give him the round just for that. And even on the feet, people were saying, well, he was leg kicking Sean a lot and they were heavy shots. So that just negates all of the shots and combinations that Sean was hitting him with. Like, it's not like the leg kicks were doing any more damage than the shots that was throwing. So I just don't understand how people thought that this one was a robbery. I thought this was a pretty clear 29-28 unanimous decision for Sean O'Malley, and really one of the more impressive wins of his career, because I think Song was a lot tougher than he thought he was going to be. And honestly, he was a lot tougher than I thought he was going to be, because I was saying since this fight was booked that it was a bad matchup for Song, because he just kind of plods forward, and that's an easy matchup for a guy like Sean O'Malley, who's a sniper. And I kind of was proven right, just to a lesser extent. I mean, Sean was able to find Song's chin quite a bit, and I just think that this was a clear victory for Sean, and it was a good rebound. It was a rebound that Sean needed, because, I mean, you lose twice in a row to the champion, worse, arguably the second time than the first time. And then that has to affect your confidence. Like, it just has to. And Sean O'Malley did talk a lot about how his mentality was going into this fight, and kind of feeling like he was raising expectations way too high for himself, that he needed to be the next big superstar. And he kind of said that, it's kind of delusional that I was thinking that I could be as big as Conor McGregor, and like, I want to get a win here, and I want to get back to where I need to be, the very top of the division. And a win like this over a contender who has been really good, it was definitely what he needed. But it was a good performance by Sean. I don't know if it'll get him a title shot. That's the thing. Usually with someone like Sean O'Malley, you'd imagine that Dana White would be like really amped up, but he wasn't after this fight. Well, after the fights in general. I'm talking about like at the press conference, because they did ask him straight up, does Sean O'Malley have a chance at getting a title shot? And Dana really seemed to be non-committal about it, which makes me think that Sean's probably not going to get the shot. I think it's going to be Merab again, which is fair. I mean, Merab, arguably the greatest bantamweight of all time at this point, and that last fight versus Petr Yan was absolutely insane. And the UFC, I mean, this is a great problem for the UFC to have at bantamweight, because Petr Yan's the champion, and now you have two fights that you can make, and they'd both be massive rematches. Well, in the case of Yan versus Merab, it'd be a trilogy, and then the O'Malley fight would be a rematch. But I think that either of those fights would be really fun to watch. But I think the UFC is probably going to go towards Merab, judging by how Dana was reacting to the idea of giving O'Malley another title shot off of this win. I would like to see Sean O'Malley fight Corey Sandhagen. I've thought that they should make that fight for years now. And it would have made a little more sense, like, going after the last Merab fight for Sean, but I think that you could still make it and fans would be excited about it. Corey Sandhagen clearly still wants that fight. But I don't know. I mean, Sugar Sean seems like he's pretty content to wait for the next title shot, but we'll see what the UFC even offers him, because he did kind of say that too. It's up to the UFC to determine what's next really in my future. So I think if he needs another fight, I could see him fighting Corey Sandhagen. I don't think O'Malley is afraid of any of these guys. That's the thing. He pays attention to his brand more than most, and some people don't like that, but like, it's just the reality of the sport nowadays. I personally don't love it. Like, I would love to. I just want to see the best fight the best, and like, but I'm also a realist. Like, I know Sean O'Malley is gonna take the fights that make sense for him, because he's in a position where he can do that. So it's good to see him get a win, though. It is good to see him get a win, and this was a win against a guy, like I said, who really was a budding top contender in this division. And you could argue that he'd be right up there for a title shot if he got through O'Malley. So it was a good performance by Sean. It was a tougher one than I think a lot of people expected, but he stood the test and he got the victory. So good on Sean. What's up, guys? Sorry to interrupt the podcast real quick, but we have a message for you guys.
If you enjoy her handbook's content, you want to see more, consider subscribing to the channel, leaving a like on the videos. All sorts of fight content as much as possible, podcasts, interviews, vlogs. We have it all over here, so thank you, appreciate it.
We appreciate you, and like he said, please subscribe. And now, back to the show. But to move on from the bantamweights to the heavyweights, Waldo Cortes-Acosta brutally TKOs Derek Lewis in round 2. And I love this guy so much. He said he wants 6 fights in 2026. I mean, that'd be absolutely insane. I don't know if that's going to happen, especially because right now he's near the top of the heavyweight division, so you don't know how many matchups you're going to get. But he did say he wants Curtis Blades next, but we'll get to that. Excuse me. But this fight, it's not as complicated as some other fights are, to recap. I mean, I think a lot of people saw it probably going this way, going in, but Derek Lewis was just so much slower than Waldo in this fight, and it was apparent really early. And Derek Lewis, for the most part, isn't really the type of guy who's getting better as the fight goes on. Like, obviously, everybody remembers the knockout against Volkov, but, like, that's not every single fight, you know? Part of the reason why that was so special is because that doesn't happen in every fight. But Waldo was just doing so much damage in the first round, and then in the second it was just getting even worse. And really the shot that ended the fight wasn't even that big of a shot. Waldo kind of hit Lewis with like a glancing shot, and Lewis fell, and he kind of just curled up into the fetal position and got beat up until the ref stopped it. So it's tough to see because I think everybody loves Derek Lewis, but he kind of quit in that fight. I mean, I don't get me wrong. If I got hit with that shot by Waldo, I'd be in a coma even today. So I think that, like, I can't really hate on it too much. I'm not the one who's in there. But I just didn't like the way that Lewis went out in this fight. I think that it was kind of, I don't know. I think he could have went a little further into this one, but it seemed like he just wanted to get out of there after a while. And Waldo, I mean, he gets the win. And it's crazy because I don't remember when it was, but it was fairly recently that he lost to Pavlovich. And it seems like Waldo is higher than Pavlovich right now, is like in terms of getting another, or in terms of getting to the title, because Pavlovich, you know, he's won a head-to-head matchup, but he hasn't really been as active as Waldo. And Waldo, if he keeps beating these top heavyweights, that matters to the UFC. That's been proven again and again. I mean, look at featherweight. Diego Lopez is getting a title shot when you have Movsar Evloev, who's undefeated. And then you also have Lerone Murphy, who is, I mean, I think Lerone deserved it even more than Movsar did, but still, my point remains, is like the active fighter is going to get the title shot. And right now, heavyweight is just, I mean, right now, I said, really for the past 5 or 6 years, heavyweight has been a mess. And it continues to be that way. Tom Aspinall, I mean, we don't know when he's going to get back in there. Right now, it's up in the air if John Jones fights again, maybe at the White House, but maybe not. Who knows? And besides that, you still have Ciryl Gane, who's sitting around because he's going to have to fight Tom Aspinall for the title again pretty soon, or whenever Tom comes back. I say pretty soon, but who knows? But yeah, so Waldo's in a spot where he wants to stay active, and I like that. And he called out Curtis Blades. That'd be a really great fight because Curtis Blades is a really good wrestler. I think that'll test Cortes-Acosta quite a bit. But Waldo's really good on the feet. Like, it's a tough fight for Curtis, but it's a tough fight for Waldo too. I think that one would be a really fun one. I think that'd be a cool fight night main event personally, but we'll see what the UFC decides to do there. I think they'll oblige Waldo. I think they want to see this guy in there more. So I don't think they'll ever be. I don't think Dana especially is ever mad at a fighter who wants to fight more. So yeah, and speaking of fighters who are probably going to be pretty active this year, let's move on to the next fight here. Women's flyweight. You have Natalia Silva beating Rose Namajunas by unanimous decision, 29-28 across all 3 judges' scorecards. So I think we should probably talk about the fight for this first because I don't want to skate over that. I thought Rose Namajunas won this fight. I really did when I was watching it live. And I watched it again. It was really close. Like I don't know if I would call it a robbery, but it was very close. And I personally still had Rose winning it even after a rewatch. But it's not like Natalia Silva didn't perform well in there. And again, I'm a realist. So like I'm talking about strictly what happened that's in the record books. Silva got the win. And you know, I kind of talked about before, like how Dana White was kind of non-committal about Sean O'Malley getting a title shot Well, he confirmed in the post-fight press conference that Natalia Silva is going to be getting a title shot. So I would consider that to be a pretty valid word, a pretty valid source. Um, I don't know when Valentina is going to be fighting again. Uh, Maybe in the spring, maybe the early summer. That now I was gonna say maybe you could put that on the White House card, but I don't know if they want to do that honestly, because that could be if especially if Valentina takes Natalia Silva down like she kind of did to Zhang Weili. That might not be the most exciting fight for a White House card, but that's just I'm a fan. I want to see these guys fight as soon as possible and on a big stage. But yeah, I mean Shevchenko versus Silva is the fight that we're gonna get. The thing right now about flyweight that kind of stinks is that Valentina Shevchenko is once again so dominant that it's like who's gonna beat her. And after this fight with Rose and Natalia, I don't really know if Natalia Silva is the person who's going to beat Valentina Shevchenko. That's the thing. Now, anything could happen. Crazier things have happened in this sport. Crazier things have happened with Valentina. I mean, I don't think a lot of people thought that there was ever going to be a rivalry with Alexa Grasso in Valentina's career, but that happened. So I shouldn't really count Natalia Silva out, but when you really think about this fight and you see how Silva looked against Thug Rose, I just don't really know if she fares very well against Valentina, because even if she does do well on the feet, I think on the ground Valentina's way better than Silva is. So it's not the most exciting fight of all time, but stylistically, especially if it stays on the feet, I could see it being pretty interesting. But yeah, I mean, Natalia's gonna get the next title shot. Sucks for Thug Rose though, man. I mean, because this was the type of, I mean, I think this was a number one contender fight for all intents and purposes. And Thug Rose, I mean, she was so close. And we were so close to getting a Valentina Shevchenko versus Rose Namajunas title fight, which would be a huge fight. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not too amped about it because, like, again, I thought Rose won this fight. I don't think it was such an egregious decision where I'm like mad that Natalia Silva is going to be getting the title shot, but it's just because when I watch that fight back, I don't see the person who's a threat to Valentina Shevchenko. I just don't. So yeah, that's ultimately what I think about this fight and what's going to come of it. And I did just want to say this too. This morning, I saw a great video of Rose Namajunas after the loss, and she was at, I think it was the hotel, and she was signing autographs and taking pictures with the fans, and she was tearing up, kind of crying, like, you know. And I don't know if it was emotions. I mean, it was probably everything, right? Probably emotions that you lost such a close fight and such a big fight. But then seeing the love that the fans are giving you, I mean, that's got to be an overwhelming feeling. And that was cool to see her taking pictures with all those people after such a tough loss, probably one of the toughest losses of her career. Just says a lot about her character and the type of person that she is. And I think that there's a reason why Rose is so beloved in the MMA community, and videos like that are really the reason why. So I just wanted to mention that on the pod real quick because, I mean, that was just a cool moment. But let's talk about this main card opener. John Silva versus Arnold Allen. This was honestly, like, going into this card, I thought that this fight was going to be fight of the night, and I think it would have if it wasn't for the main event. But it was an outstanding fight. Silva wins via unanimous decision, 130-27, 229-28, and Arnold Allen started this fight really strongly because he was moving around a lot. Silva was having trouble hitting him clean, and Allen was hitting him with a lot of shots off the outside, a lot of counters, and he was kicking the legs a little bit too. But then in the second round, Silva kind of drew Allen into a brawl, and Arnold Allen's a really good fighter, but he's just not really much of a brawler. He's a guy that's going to hit you with a lot of jabs, a lot of combinations, and he's going to piece you up to all parts of the body until you just wilt. But in a brawl, he doesn't have the most power. So that's why when John Silva kind of drew him into that, I was kind of getting worried. And really, the way I scored this fight, I had Arnold Allen winning the first round, and then I gave Silva the second and the third. And as the fight went on, it just went towards Silva more and more. And like I said, I thought Allen started off really well, mixing up the strikes, moving well, but he got drawn into that slugfest, and he was kind of just getting pieced up because he was really only using punches. He wasn't using his full game, and Silva took big advantage of that. So it was a really good win by John Silva, a win that he needed because it seemed like a lot of the fans were starting to turn on him. And I mean, this is kind of what I'm saying. Like, MMA fans sometimes can be so bitter. Like, John Silva's a character. I'm a big fan of this guy because, like, you look at even Fight Week, I mean, him screaming and sobbing in front of the belt, that was crazy. I mean, when have you seen a guy do that? That was just something. Then him and Arnold Allen at the presser was probably the only funny part of the entire thing. That press conference kind of stunk, if I'm being honest. But that stuff between those two was funny. I'm not even gonna get into it past that. You guys saw it, I'm sure. But even in the fight, John Silva, as he said, John Silva was aura farming as he used Arnold Allen as a surfboard in the middle of the fight. That was pretty interesting. And even when I was watching it live, I'm like, this guy, he's just out there. And he just excites me. Like, every time this dude's on a card, I get excited because it's like, win or lose, we're going to get some interesting moments, that's for sure. Some memeable moments. And John Silva he gave us at least 4 or 5 this whole week. So I was amped about that. But, I mean, this was a really fun fight. Like, I think the main event really overshadowed how fun of a fight this was. And it was an important fight at 145 for both of these guys. And it sucks for Arnold Allen. I mean, he was doing real good, and then he got hurt. I'm talking about, like, really good in the past, and then got hurt, and was out for a long time going into this fight. I think it's been like a year and a half since he had last fought before this. And I wouldn't even say rust is what lost him the fight. Like I said, I just think he got drawn into a brawl, and, the brawler won the fight. So it's unfortunate for Arnold, but John Silva gets the win. And, I mean, you can match him up with any of the top guys at 145, and it would be an awesome fight. So I think we'll probably see whatever happens with him in the future fairly soon, but we will see. So before we move on to Zuffa Boxing, I did want to talk about a couple of the prelims, mainly the main prelim, Umar Nurmagomedov versus Davison Figueiredo, 30-27 across the board. Umar wins via unanimous decision. This fight, it was a frustrating watch, if I'm being honest, and I can't even imagine how frustrated Umar was in there against Figgy, because Figgy really just played it too safe in this fight. He was retreating the entire time. He wasn't really making Umar do anything because, like, he was just backing up the entire fight, and it's kind of hard to fight somebody who's not engaging. And the fact that Umar still won pretty handily and showed a lot of his skills on the feet, a lot of his skills on the ground, I mean, I thought that was pretty impressive considering he basically was fighting against an opponent who was not doing anything. And it's just hard to fight somebody like that because if they're not taking any risks, it's kind of hard to open any area of their game. Like, the thing with Figgy, I mean, he just wasn't throwing. He wasn't overextending at all. It's like, so Umar was kind of just walking him down, landing shot here, shot there. Took him down a couple of times and did pretty well on the ground. But Figgy really just didn't want to have a lot of offense in this fight, and it just made for kind of a lackluster fight. I mean, I was pretty excited for this one coming in because it's weird. Like, Umar Nurmagomedov, like, he has that last name, so everybody just assumes grappler. But, like, Umar's a really talented striker. He's one of the best strikers in that division. But he just wasn't really able to show much of his all-around game because Figgy was playing it so safe. He wasn't doing anything. And it's kind of hard to fight somebody who's running away the entire time. So I was a bit disappointed, but not because of Umar. I was disappointed more so in Figgy because, like, you come in, you miss weight, and then you have a stinker performance like that made the guy who beat you up look bad. It's just, yeah, I didn't enjoy that one at all. But Umar gets the win, and yeah, I mean, it's still good. Gets a victory, moves up a little bit. Some people were saying that they like to see him fight Sean O'Malley. I don't know if Sean takes that fight. That's a tough one, especially when Sean sees a title shot, like, really close, like you could almost touch it. I think Umar would be a risky fight to take. I don't even think it's a matchup thing. Like, I'm sure Sean O'Malley, if booked against him, would be confident, but I just think it's probably too much of a risk for him considering he's right on the doorstep of another title fight. And Umar isn't. Like, Umar has a lot more to gain from this than Sean does. So it's unfortunate that Figgy kind of just didn't really want to engage in this fight. But besides that, I did want to talk a little bit about Josh Hokit because, love him or hate him, I think this guy is part of the future at heavyweight. And, I mean, might be the present pretty soon because I think heavyweight is such a dull division at this point. I mean, it just absolutely sucks right now. That's why we have all this talk with Gable Stevenson coming in, and who knows how quickly they'll fast track him up the division whenever he gets into the UFC, which seems inevitable at this point. We kind of talked about it in our preview going into the year. But the thing is with Josh Hokit, he's here right now, and I think that whether you love or hate the persona that Hokit has, you care about his fights. And I think that's all the UFC really cares about because eyeballs means money. So Josh Hokit, I think he could add a lot of flair, a lot of skill to the top 10 at heavyweight because, even behind the trash talk, this dude's really talented. I mean, he's a really talented wrestler. He's got good ground and pound, good submission game. On the feet, he's not really too bad either. Needs to be said, his opponent, Denzel Freeman, gave, maybe outside of CM Punk, one of the worst performances I think I've ever seen in the UFC. But Josh Hokit, I think, also did a part in making him look that bad. It just looked like he was lost in there. And that's part of the reason why I think that Josh Hokit should be fast-tracked after this fight, because I think he made Denzel Freeman look horrible in there. And I think that that fight really showed that there's levels in this game. And I think Josh Hokit right now is already a top 10 heavyweight in terms of skill. It's just a matter of getting a number next to his name. So I would like to see the UFC give him a ranked opponent next. I think he's earned it. And which is crazy to say because it's not like he's had that many fights, but heavyweight is just absolutely garbage right now. So I would personally like to see Josh Hokit get fast tracked because I think he'd probably do pretty well. I don't know if he's at the tippy top of heavyweight yet, but I think he could beat a lot of the guys that are in the top 10 right now. Like, let me look up like the UFC rankings for heavyweight. And like I said, I'm recording this on Monday, so expect some things to change tomorrow. But the top 10, Marcin Tybura. Tough fight, but he could win it. Same with Delija. Derek Lewis, if he could take Derek Lewis down, I think he wins it. Spivak, that'd be an interesting matchup. Almeida would be a really interesting matchup. And I think in the top 5 is kind of when you start to push it a little bit. But I think the bottom half of that top 10, there's at least 2 or 3 fights that could be really interesting. So we'll see what they do with Josh Hokit. I mean, just talking about the card in general, like just a couple of other stories. Alexander Hernandez versus Michael Johnson randomly got scrapped like hours before the fight card because of suspicious betting movement. Not a good sign. And the thing is, the UFC, like, they just want to avoid this at all costs. Because, especially now, I saw a lot of rumblings of this when TKO Group, like, first formed, when the UFC and WWE first merged as one big company. People were kind of concerned about, like, kind of the overlap between pro wrestling and MMA. Things like this don't really help, obviously. I mean, I don't get me wrong. I'm not saying anything about like the UFC being rigged. I'm just talking about people who aren't educated on the sport or the business side of it at all and might think a certain way because they're associated. But the UFC, I think, made the right call in scrapping this fight. It's very weird. I mean, I think Alexander Hernandez went from like a 2-1 favorite to a plus 100 underdog within like a couple hours. And I think the prop bet for Hernandez to get knocked out in the first also moved dramatically. So it's not good. I mean, I doubt that we see Hernandez fighting again very soon, or at least until this is publicly cleared up. It doesn't seem like it had much to do with Michael Johnson. But yeah, it's a tough look. But thankfully this card was so phenomenal for that it really the UFC is not going to have to worry much about this in terms of the headlines coming into this week. But besides that, Dominick Cruz, he got inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. I mean, he's one of my favorite fighters of all time. A guy who, when I was getting into the sport, was one of my favorite fighters. I mean, that footwork, he's the type of guy, and Joe Rogan, I think, is the one who always says this. If you just saw a silhouette of Dominick Cruz fighting, you'd know it's him because of that crazy footwork. And his wrestling was phenomenal. He had really good boxing. And, people kind of figured him out towards the end of his career, but that was also after a ton of injuries. I don't think he was really the same after all of those, but I choose to think about prime Dominick Cruz coming up in the WEC, that rivalry with Faber that really launched the smaller weight classes in the UFC and made them big and made fans care about it. And really Cruz's whole rivalry with Team Alpha Male in general. I mean, against Faber, Cody Garbrandt, TJ Dillashaw. I mean, I remember that TJ Dillashaw fight, man. I mean, that was just absolutely insane. And, yeah, I mean, that was probably my favorite Cruz fight. But, the achievements speak for themselves. I mean, WEC champ, two-time UFC bantamweight champion, multiple knee injuries. I think he had a torn quad at one point, messed up shoulder after the Cejudo fight. Always was able to overcome these things and come back and still get wins and look like his old self. He's so important to the sport. And, people rag on him sometimes for some of the takes that he has, during the broadcasts or on social media. But, fans really got to appreciate how good Dominick Cruz was. And this dude was the greatest bantamweight of all time for a long time and still arguably is. I would say Merab has a pretty good case against him. But, Cruz, I mean, guys like Merab wouldn't even be in the UFC if it wasn't for Dominick Cruz. That needs to be said. And I just, it's crazy to me that he's not even fighting anymore. This is how I feel like I'm only 24, but I feel like I'm getting old because all these fighters who I grew up watching, they're retiring or getting put into the Hall of Fame. Robbie Lawler last year really did a number on me when I was like, oh my God. I remember when Lawler fought Rory, when he fought Condit, all those good fights, man. But yeah, it's cool to see a guy like that get his flowers. And it was cool that he was on the desk when that happened. It was nice to see his live reaction. I mean, I know they always show them in the crowd, but it seemed like Dominick didn't know that was coming. And that was a really nice moment there to get him into the UFC Hall of Fame. Well deserved. And it'll be cool to see the actual ceremony. And I think they probably do it in June or July. It's usually the week of International Fight Week. But enough of the UFC talk. We got to get into some boxing. And it was a pretty big weekend, really, for Dana White because Zuffa Boxing debuted on Paramount Plus just like the UFC did. But the difference is that the UFC is much more established. And with all of the talk coming in, people definitely had their eyes on Zuffa Boxing 1. And there was some good, there was some bad. But overall, I would say it was really solid for a first event. I'm talking first strictly from a fighting perspective. I thought the fights were awesome. I really enjoyed the fights. And they were much better than your typical boxing card from start to finish because the matchups were all good matchups, top prospects, and it's not undefeated dudes fighting a guy who's 10-40. These fights, I think the combined records was 272-9, something along those lines. But yeah, I thought the fights were really awesome for Zuffa Boxing 1. They were really well matched and just very exciting from start to finish. And I enjoyed that side of it. The commentary side is kind of where I have my criticism. And my criticism for Zuffa Boxing on Paramount is very different than my criticism of the UFC's broadcast on Paramount. And I'll explain why. So the UFC starting on Paramount, like I said, the UFC has their crew, their production crew, and it looked pretty much like any other UFC card. The only there were little flubs here and there, but overall it went off without a hitch. Zuffa Boxing, production-wise, went off without a hitch, but the thing is, I think the commentary side of it was just god-awful. I mean, Max Kellerman especially. And this is a guy, I grew up with HBO Boxing, watching the face-offs with Max Kellerman, but I don't know what has happened since he got hired by Zuffa. I mean, he's really just a bootlicker for the brand at this point. And, there's a difference between being a bootlicker and a company man. Like, I think guys like Michael Bisping and Daniel Cormier are company men for the UFC, but they're not, like, completely, just completely biased about the company. Max Kellerman, I mean, some of the things that he was saying during the broadcast was just egregious. I mean, during the main event, he was comparing Callum Walsh to Roy Jones Jr. I mean, what? I don't even know how your mind goes. Let me tell you, I was watching that fight, and I've seen a few Callum Walsh fights at this point. Roy Jones Jr. isn't the guy who I'd compare him to. And personally, I also don't really think that Callum is that fantastic in terms of the top of the division. But the thing is, you just can't have a guy on there who's just so clearly biased towards the company and like who they're building. Because Callum Walsh, he looked good in that fight, but he didn't look fantastic. And to compare him to Roy Jones Jr. and the way they've been glazing Dana White and Zuffa Boxing, like I said, I get being a company man, but there's better ways to promote your company than just straight out exaggerating and lying every few seconds, really. It was kind of rough, but the fights themselves, I really enjoyed watching them. So I think if the UFC, I think if Zuffa continues to move in this direction, I think they're going to do good. And I do think that it made a lot of sense to have this soft launch at the Apex for Zuffa Boxing, because right now you're still building the brand. You're going to have to make some concessions early. Like, they signed Jai Opetaia, arguably the best cruiserweight in the world right now, probably is the best cruiserweight in the world. Dana White has publicly said they're willing to let him fight for an undisputed title, but we all know the goal is for there to be a Zuffa Boxing belt. And right now, they're really only acknowledging the Ring Magazine's belt, which is Turki Al Sheikh's. But I think you kind of have to start it like this if you're going to keep moving in that like upward trajectory, because you can't take it over on day one in boxing. It's just not possible. But if you can keep kind of building through young stars and then kind of like making those stars into the top fighters in their respective divisions, that's how you start to make Zuffa matter a lot more. And obviously getting a guy like Jai Opetaia, I mean, that was gigantic. That's a huge signing for them. And I'm really curious to kind of see what they do with him in the future. So, yeah, I mean, overall, I thought it was really fun. I enjoyed watching it. But like I said, Max Kellerman, I mean, I don't know what they could do about that. But someone's got to tell them in the next meeting, like, hey, man, you can pump the brakes a little bit on the glazing. So it is that was a bit of a tough part of the broadcast to watch. But the fights were amazing. But yeah, I'm curious what you guys thought of the UFC's first Paramount broadcast, what you guys thought of Zuffa Boxing 1. Definitely let me know in the comments. One last thing to kind of talk about here, and we'll kind of get through this quickly because, to be honest, it's a big deal, but it doesn't deserve too much airtime. But Don Davis steps down as CEO of the PFL. Jake Paul splits with the PFL. Right now, I really do think that it's a make or break year for the PFL in 2026. This is the last year of their ESPN deal. Highly doubt they're going to get re-signed. They're clearly just going downhill for multitude of reasons, all pretty much self-caused. When it comes to the promotion of their fights, the PFL might be the worst in MMA history. And even going into this week, I saw that they were posting Justin Gaethje clips. I'm like, way to give the UFC free promo. I don't know what they're doing by giving Justin Gaethje airtime on their own platforms. I get that he fought for the World Series of Fighting, which turned into the PFL, but it's not a flex. Like, you guys lost this dude to the UFC, and like, he's not fighting in your promotion and hasn't in a very long time. So it's I don't know. They kind of shoot themselves in the foot a lot. Their promotion is completely whack. I mean, the Francis Ngannou situation has just been handled terribly by them. He's fought one time for the PFL, and I think maybe you get one more fight from Francis, then he walks too, because it looks like the PFL right now is a sinking ship. Um, and I think that's why Jake Paul kind of split from them too. I mean, what momentum was there to get Jake Paul in the MMA cage? Uh, but yeah, Don Davis. I mean, from what I heard, the PFL is hundreds of millions of dollars in debt. So it's not looking good for them, honestly. And it's I'm not like I'm smiling because it's kind of. I mean, we've talked about this ad nauseum. It's all completely self-inflicted from the PFL, but it's not good for the sport. I mean, you need another good MMA promotion like the PFL, because if the PFL goes under, that's just one less destination for free agents to go to, and the UFC already is a monopoly. But if the PFL goes away, I mean, that's a really, really bad thing for the sport, because one championship, they're really good in terms of all of martial arts, but they're not really that big in America. And it seems like the MMA portion of their cards are really just dwindling away slowly. So then if the PFL goes away too, I mean, that's just horrible, because at that point, where else do fighters go in mixed martial arts? It's kind of, I talked to Eddie Alvarez about this at the open workouts for Knucklemania 6 a few days ago, actually. Like, reasons why the BKFC, Karate Combat, Dirty Boxing, those are really the only options right now for ex-UFC fighters, which sucks. And I'm not saying that it sucks because those promotions stink. They're awesome. I think that they're actually doing a great job, because making they're making MMA fans watch, but they're doing something completely different. So they're like competing with the UFC, but not directly. And I think that's why MMA fans kind of gravitate towards it, because it's a different thing. Like, nobody's watching like a BKFC card, for example, and saying, well, that's the best whatever division mixed martial artist in the world, because they're not doing mixed martial arts, which makes BKFC a lot more credible as a promotion. But right now in MMA strictly, there's not any competition for the UFC. And like I said, the PFL's probably going to go under. One championship seems to be slowly pulling themselves out of the MMA market. And in the US, they've never really done a good job at entering it. Right now, for ex-UFC fighters, it seems like those alternate rule set promotions are the ones to go to if you want to keep your name relevant. BKFC does a great job. Dirty Boxing does a good job. Karate Combat does a great job. But PFL won championship. You know, Bellator was there before the PFL bought them out. It's not looking good right now for the competition aspect of free agency and mixed martial arts. So just kind of wanted to give some time to that, because it's a little alarming, and I'm kind of curious to see what happens in 2026 for mixed martial arts. But no breaks from the UFC to start the year. Next week, UFC 325. So 2 straight numbered cards. It's getting weird, like not saying pay-per-views. But this card, it's not quite as stacked as 324 was, but the main card's looking really good. I mean, Volk versus Diego Lopez 2. I still don't love that this is the fight, but you can't argue with it being an exciting matchup. So, I mean, I'm excited for the fight itself, but I still wish that it was Lerone Murphy in this title shot, because I really do think that he earned it. But yeah, we're getting a rematch with Volk and Lopez. I mean, can't be too mad at it. Dan Hooker fighting Benoit Saint-Denis. That's a really fun fight, lightweight. And yeah, I don't. BSD, I think that he's one of those guys that really is the future at lightweight. I think that they kind of pushed him too soon when he fought Dustin Poirier, but this is a really interesting matchup, and I'm curious to see how BSD does against Dan Hooker. Rafael Fiziev is back against Mauricio Rufy. That fight is that might be fight of the night. That really might be fight of the night. And then heavyweight, Tai Tuivasa is returning at heavyweight versus Taliesin Teixeira. Should be interesting. I mean, Tai Tuivasa, he's been inactive for a long time, coming off a lot of losses. Taliesin is coming off of a loss, but you know, he's proven that he's a fun fighter to watch at heavyweight. It's going to be interesting to see if he can kind of break into the upper echelon, because Towson didn't really do very well against Derek Lewis. But that was another thing. Like, they also kind of fast-tracked him a little bit. You kind of have to at heavyweight nowadays, like I said. But next week's card should be really fun. Hopefully Tiz is back from the Overlook for next week's pod. You know, I don't mind talking to you guys just sitting in front of the camera, but it's a lot more fun with my boys sitting next to me. So, and I'm sure you guys miss Tiz just as much as I do. So, hope you guys enjoyed the pod. Hope this was an interesting recap of just the crazy week that's really we just had in mixed martial arts. So, we will see y'all next week.
Feel just like a superstar. Doing all these drugs, I don't think I'm gonna see tomorrow. Living fast, brand new dash within a foreign car. It's the type of shit that you be doing when you go.